Leviticus chapter 9. The chapter starts off with a bunch of stuff that we're kind of familiar with because this is somewhat like we saw in the book of Exodus, where in the 20s, I should say, of Exodus, chapter 20s, I think 5, 6, 7, we see the commands for the construction of the tabernacle given. And then the latter 30s chapters of Exodus, we see them doing it. So you get kind of repeat. And what we're going to see in the beginning of this chapter is just that. In chapters 7 and 8, the latter portion of 7, or actually, no, just chapter 8. I'm thinking of 6 and 7. Chapter 8, God gives them the command on how to consecrate the tabernacle and all of the priests with all the sacrifices and the shedding of blood and what gets offered, and now in chapter 9, we're going to watch them do it all. So it's kind of a repeat of yesterday up until the very end, which has got some great stuff. And so it came to pass on the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and sons of Israel, take for yourselves a young bull, a sin offering, and a ram. And so they consecrated themselves. That was the last chapter. They gave the instructions. They did the ceremonies for themselves. And so now they get bulls and rams as peace offerings and sacrifices. And it says in verse 4, for today the Lord will appear to you. So this was going to be a special deal, that God was now going to appear to them as they do these sacrifices. So they brought what Moses commanded, verse 5, before the tabernacle of meeting, and all the congregation drew near and stood before the Lord. This is the thing which the Lord commanded you to do, and the glory of the Lord will appear to you. And Moses said to Aaron, go to the altar. In fact, I'm going to go like this. I'm going to get some highlighting action. Look at this. For the Lord will appear to you, and the glory of the Lord will appear to you. Go to the altar, offer your sin offering, your burnt offering, make atonement for yourselves, for the people, make an offering for the people, make atonement for them as the Lord has commanded. And so Aaron goes and he kills the calf and makes a sin offering for himself, verse 8 says. And then he takes it and he dips the blood, and he puts the blood on the altar, on the horns, and around the base of the altar. He takes the fat, the kidneys, fatty lobe, right? And those get burned on the altar as a sweet smelling aroma to the Lord. And so they became a burnt offering. And then when he's done with that, he takes and he gets the people's offering. So he makes one for himself and he makes one for the people. Verse 15, a sin offering for the people. And it's just like the first one, it says. Verse 16, he brings the burnt offering then and offered it according to the prescribed manner. Then he brought the grain offering and he took a handful of it and burnt it according to the prescribed manner, right? And then he gets a peace offering now. So these are all offerings we've been covering in Leviticus. So if you've done chapters 1 through 7, you know all the different offerings. And so he gets the peace offering for the people. Aaron and his sons presented him the blood, which he sprinkled all around the altar. And the fat from the bull and the ram, the fatty tail, covers the entrails, the kidneys, and the fatty lobe attached to the liver. Verse 20, and they put the fat on the breasts, and he burned the fat on the altar. But the breast and the right thigh Aaron waved as a wave offering before the Lord, as Moses had commanded. Okay. So we see the peace offering, we see a wave offering, we see all these offerings, all these sacrifices. People are bringing it all before the Lord. And they're doing it as Moses commanded, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And it's all done in the prescribed manner. And then God comes through with his promise. Verse 22 says, then Aaron lifted his hands toward the people, blessed them, and came down from offering the sin offering, the burnt offering, and peace offerings. Now, what did Aaron say? Well, we're in the book of Leviticus, and Leviticus, it may stretch, a little bit the timeline, where Leviticus is right here, and there's stuff happening on either side. There's only a few stories in Leviticus. Most of it's just information. But we know from Numbers chapter 6 that Aaron had a specific blessing with which he'd bless the people. In fact, we talked about this at our church last Sunday. Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the way you shall bless the children of Israel. Say to them, The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. And so this is the idea of Aaron blessing the people, as he's giving them the Lord's blessing. And verse 23, it says, Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle meeting and came out and blessed the people. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. When the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. So what we have here is literally the Shekinah glory, they call it, God's presence descending on the tabernacle, and then out from within the tabernacle, from within the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant sat, fire comes out and it consumes everything on the altar, which obviously would have been a very spectacular event to see. What we see here, though, in short, is a God's people gathering together in obedience, and they're doing what God has commanded them to do, the way God commanded them to do it. And after this, God's glory falls. When Jesus told the disciples to tarry in Jerusalem and wait for the promise of the Father, that's just what they did. They went where Jesus said to go. They did what Jesus said to do. And we see on the day of Pentecost, the tongues of fire, the sound like a mighty rushing wind, right? And we see great things happen. When we see God's people gathering together, doing what God has commanded them to do, we find God showing up. And so, it might just be a simple exhortation today, but when we do what God tells us to do, God blesses it and God shows up. And when we do things in an unprescribed manner, not the way God told us to, well, he might show up for that too, but not in the way we want him to. And that's part of tomorrow's lesson. So we'll save that for tomorrow. But all this said, God bless you guys. A little bit shorter today, but kind of a to-the-point message. When we gather in obedience, God shows up. Hope you guys have a great day. Today's Thursday, Women's Bible Study. Last night we did a Passover meal at our church, and again, it was really cool because it was unlike anything I've ever seen, which is trying to follow the first century protocol. I see, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get into that now, but most churches I see, most people I see, they follow more of the modern traditions, but those weren't around in Jesus's time, and so we worked hard at doing it first century style, prior to the destruction of the temple, like Jesus would have done on the week of his crucifixion. So had a good time. Hopefully we'll do it again next year. We can get more people together. So anyway, love you guys. You guys take care. And I'll see you bright and early tomorrow on Good Friday.